لا يبيته في بيته دينار ولا درهم. He would not sleep with anything in his house. He would always give out from charity. This is absolute trust in Allah. It's a high maqam. It's not for everybody. The Prophet also taught us ليدخر, to save, to even food. The Prophet, the Arabs had a lot of famine, so he would put food for a year, but it would always be exhausted because he would give it out to poor people. لا يأخذ مما آتاه الله شيئا إلا قوت أهله. He would only take from what Allah had given him except just enough for his family. And he said, من أصبح آمنا في سربه معافا في بدنه له قوت يومه فكأنما حيز الدنيا بحذافيرها. Anyone who gets up and is safe in his person, in his property, he's safe in his person, he's got good health, and he has enough for that day, just that day, it's as if he has the whole world and everything in it. That's our Prophet ﷺ. He said, don't expect to see the end of the day. Every day should be the last day as far as you're concerned. And then he mentioned the things, so I won't mention those. They were mentioned in that beautiful hadith in the Shama'il. But then he says, كَانَ أَعَفَّ النَّاسِ وَأَشَدُّهُمْ إِكْرَامًا لِأَصْحَابِهِ. He was the most chaste of men, and he was the most generous to his companions. لَا يَمُدُّ رِجْلَيْهِ بَيْنَهُمْ. He would never outstretch his feet in the presence of his companions. In other words, he would always respect them. With the Arabs, it was always considered to put your soles of your feet to face somebody was aib. The Arabs didn't do that. In fact, there's a famous story of Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, when a man was asking him really stupid questions. And he said, what time is it? He said, it's time for Abu Hanifa to stretch his legs. But he never did that, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَيُوَسِّعُ عَلَيْهِمْ إِذَا ضَاقَ الْمَكَانِ. And he would always give them room. If there was no room, I was once with a Mauritanian Sheikh, really great Sheikh who died, Allah yarhamu, the son of Muhammad Amin, and we were going to the masjid when I was living in Medina. I was a young man studying there, and we came into the masjid, and I'll never forget this. He came up and he asked this man, حُزْ عَنَّا, he said, يا أخي المكان ضيق. He said, the place is ضيق. He said, الضيق في القلوب. He said that constriction is in your own heart. And we just went somewhere else. But he missed the opportunity to sit next to a great scholar. He was a mufassir of Quran. He said, الضيق في القلوب. It's not in the space. There's always room. There's always room. يُكْرِمُ أَهْلَ الْفَضْلِ. This is very important because the Prophet ﷺ recognized manazil. Everybody is equal in their humanity. Everybody is equal in their spiritual possibility for salvation. But people are different in their contribution to a culture, to a civilization, to a village, to a family. They're different. And that's why Sayyidina Ali said, قِيمَةَ الْمَرْءِ فِي مَا يَحْسِنُهُ. The value of a man is in his ihsan, what he does well. So he would always, يُنَزِّلَ النَّاسِ مَنَازِلَهُم, and he said, I was commanded to do that. He didn't treat scholars the same way he treated other people. This was our Prophet ﷺ. Whoever saw him suddenly was always taken aback because he had a haiba. But if he sat with them, they would fall in love. And there are many people who came and they said he was the most odious person to them because of what they'd heard. All the like poor people here. Many people hate the Prophet because they don't know. They heard lies about him. They heard lies. Really terrible lies too. And so once they got to know him, they would love him. Safiya, the Jewish, she was the wife of one of the notables. When Khaybar happened, she was taken captive. The Prophet sat with her for 2 hours explaining why he fought her family. And she said, he was the most hated person to me. And after those 2 hours, there was nobody in this world more beloved to me. And one day she came to him complaining about how the women called her a Yahudiya. He said, go back, tell them, my father's Aaron, my uncle's Moses, and my husband's Muhammad. Nothing to be ashamed of, something to be proud of. One of my Mauritanian teachers came here and we visited this place in New Mexico, and there was a Jewish man who'd converted to Islam. And he treated him so well. I was really amazed. He just treated him so well. And one day I just asked him, he said, MashaAllah, you're really taken to Mustafa. He said, Hada wali min awliyaillah. That's what he told me. He said, he's a wali. I said, how do you know? He said, Yahudi aslama hada wilaya. He said, so you have to consider them wilaya. It's very hard for that community. They were given so much. Allah gave them so much. Allah gave them continual prophets. What He gave us was continual ulama. See, our ulama are like the prophets of Bani Israel. And those of us who've studied with them, the real ulama, not the likes of, we're like Tufailiyun ala Ma'idah. The real ulama, if you study with Murabt al-Hajj, anybody who met him, you sit with these people and you know that these people, they have miraculous lives. The amount of ibadah they can do, the fact that they never speak ill of people. Just that, if you meet anybody that never speaks ill of people, assume they're a wali of Allah. Because it's a hard thing to do. It's just easy to do it. Ahmad Zarruq said, the most dangerous thing you can ask anybody is how's so-and-so? Because he said, يَفْتَحُ بَابَ الْغِيبَةِ. It opens the door of backbiting. And he said that Imam Nawawi called something غِيبَةً مُتَفَقِّح, like the ghiba of somebody who has a little bit of learning. Miskeen, fulan, poor man, Allah yahdi, may Allah guide him. He pretends to have compassion for him. He always accepted the excuse of somebody who gave him an excuse. Even the people that lied to him, he would always accept it. When children under 7, you should never assume they're lying. They just live in a magical world where you say, who broke the vase? I don't know. That's a possibility in a 5-year-old's mind, right? They're not in the age of tamyiz, so you have to forgive them. But as you get older, people learn how to lie. But your children, I would never, if my child told me something, I would, sometime my wife would say, he's not telling the truth. I said, no, it's impossible. He would never lie to us. We're his parents. I wanted them to understand that. I couldn't believe they would lie. And that's the way the Prophet ﷺ was. He gave people husn al-dhan, even though he knew what they were up to, but he would always do that. He would never let anybody walk behind him. He would, subhanAllah. And he used to say, let the angels walk behind me. He wouldn't let them walk behind him. One man, there was a servant who he asked him to get up on his camel so he could ride with him. And he was too, he just couldn't do it. And so the Prophet said, you go ahead. You go ahead to where you're going. Don't go behind me. So he wouldn't even go ahead of him. He would never walk faster. If an old person was walking, he would never go ahead of them. He would slow down. Because old people, it makes them feel old when somebody just briskly walks by them. And on and on and on. There's so many that you can go on and not end, but I will end because all things must come to an end. And we could never really fulfill the praises of the Prophet ﷺ. But I want to end with, I think, one of the most powerful proofs of who he was. And there's a couple of things that really recently came to me. One of them, I met a South Asian man who was, I think, probably having some doubts about just religion. And many people are. And we have to have compassion for these people, because when you look at the world as it is, it's very difficult to see. We're in the Khandaq. And there's a lot of people that can't see the the palaces of Syria and the palaces of Persia. They just stuck in the Khandaq. The Prophet ﷺ, the Quran mentions only 4 chapters have ethnic components in the Quran. Chapter 17 is called the chapter of Bani Israel. And this is a very important human community. The influence that they have is extraordinary. And all of the horrors that we've been witnessing in Palestine being done to these poor people that really they have no army, they have no air force, they have no defense, they're being bombed relentlessly, humanitarian aid being withheld. I mean, these fanatics going and even destroying food and things that were supposed to go to these people. It's beyond belief to see this. And I know it's so painful for people. The Jewish community historically is a community that has held to a book, the Torah. And when they broke from that Torah, many, many problems came with that break. And then attempt to restore that Torah brought all of these heresies into their own teaching, like the heresies of Rabbi Kook, as opposed to the more orthodox position of Rabbi Teitelbaum, who still these Orthodox Jews follow. But the Jewish community is a community that has immense education, and when you look at their positions in this country, if you look at the Nobel Prize, the contributions, all these things, this is something that the Muslims had and we lost. This is something we had and we lost. And so we cannot fault people. We can definitely fault what's happening, and we should, and condemn it, what's happening to these people. But we cannot fault people for being in the positions that they have acquired through incredible effort and work when we haven't done the same. We have to rise up as a community because we have the talent, we have the intelligence, especially in these United States. I mean, this community is an amazing community. But Bani Israel is right there in the Quran. And you look at how many verses deal with the Jews. Never an unqualified statement. Minhum al-mu'minun, amongst them are believers. Wa aktharuhum al-fasiqun. Sounds like a lot of communities. Minhum man huwa dinaran yuaddihi ilayk. Some of them you trust them with a lot of money, they're trustworthy. Other ones, even if it's a small amount, you have to keep on them. Right? Laysu sawa. They're not the same, all of them. This is the Quran distinguishes. It doesn't collectivize. It always distinguishes. And that's why it's very important that the Muslim community recognize that. The Quran, the only time the Quran doesn't distinguish is with believers. And now Muslims, too many of us make all the kuffar one thing. But the Muslims, he's this, he's that, right? So that's a problem in our community. But Bani Israel, the second one, chapter 30, Rome, the Europeans. I mean, isn't it interesting that the two most powerful elements in our modern world have chapters named after them? There's no chapter called Faris. Even though Persia was the most powerful empire at that time, it was more powerful than the Byzantines. But the Prophet said, Al-Furs la akhsha alaykum. The Persians, he wasn't worried about. He knew people like Ali Attai would come out of those people. Great defenders of this religion, great intellects. That's what he knew. Look at the Persians. He's amazing people. The Persians. Allahu Akbar. Look at them. Tirmidhi, Sibawi, Ghazali, Maulana Rumi, Saadi, Hafid, Shabastari. You just go on and on and on. Amazing people. He knew that, he said, Satakun lahum natha. They'll have one butt, Qadisiyah. And then he said, Thumma la Faris. And then there's no, he didn't mean there's no more Persia. He meant there's no more fear of them. It's a great civilization that gave the world so much. But he wasn't worried about them. But he said, Ar-Rum, That al-Qurun, the Europeans. And it is the Europeans, my friends. When you see a Rome in any hadith, and in that chapter of the Quran, this is not the Byzantines, it's not the Greeks, it's the Europeans. And their sacred history all goes back to Rome. Read the Venerable Bede. The sacred history goes back to Rome. Rome, that al-Qurun, they will be multi-generational. Kullu ma haraka qarnun, baraza qarnun akhar. Every time you see one of them, their generation destroyed, another one rises up. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. How did he know that in the 7th century? How did he know that in the 7th century? How did he know that? How did he know Persia would end? He didn't see that in his lifetime. How did he know that Rome wouldn't end? And then he said, Ashabu sakhrin wa bahrin. They will possess the land and the sea. And now the air. Bahar is one of the words for the air also. Ashabu bahrin wa sakhrin. Hayhata, hayhata. In other words, don't think you're going to ever conquer them. Hayhata, hayhata. Wa innama harakatu ma'as-sa'a. Their end comes with the hour. So we have to learn to live with these people. We need to teach them who we are. Encourage them. They're getting better. They're getting better. You know, they haven't dropped an atom bomb in over 70 years. Yeah. So we don't want atom bombs. We should be concerned about this. You know, one of these guys the other day said, maybe we're facing a nuclear war. It's not a joke. Annie Jacobson, read her book. And Surah Dukhan, فَارْتَقِبْ يَوْمَ تَأْتِيَ السَّمَاءُ بِدُخَانٍ مُبِينٍ. Fear a day when the skies will bring a clear smoke, a manifest smoke. يَغْشَى النَّاسِ, it will overwhelm people. هَذَا عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, this is a manifest punishment. رَبَّنَا اكْشِفْ عَنَّا الْعَذَابِ. The believers say, remove this adhab. Inna mu'minun, we're believers. Nuclear winter. The earth is covered in smoke. I don't know, maybe that's one of the meanings. Maybe that's where it's all headed. Because we know Iblis wins in the dunya. He loses in the akhirah, but he wins here. The Prophet said the end of time won't come until nobody says Allah, Allah. So Dawkins, yeah, you can rejoice here now. Right? But if you think a world with religion is bad, just wait till a world without religion. So that's something to think about.